Over the past 25 years, Raymond Manning's creative leadership has established Manning Architects with a regional and national reputation in urban design and planning. The core of Mr. Manning's work has surrounded the development, planning, urban design of the city of New Orleans before and after Hurricane Katrina and Rita in 2005. In post-Katrina New Orleans, Mr. Manning was responsible for spearheading the Bring New Orleans Back neighborhood recovery planning process, which led to the funding and organizational structure of the Unified New Orleans Plan, the city's official recovery plan, and numerous other efforts to reinvigorate and restore the city. His current work for the New Orleans Master Plan, the city's official development plan, the New Orleans Union Passenger Terminal Multimodal Master Plan, Regional Planning Commission feasibility study for the Andrew Higgins Pedestrian Access Plan, and the Regional Transit Authority Streetcar Extension Program are all a few examples of the urban design and planning efforts locally which are contributing to the transformation of New Orleans. The civic and design leadership which he has demonstrated in his work has made him a sought-after speaker, contributor, and lecturer at national, international conferences and events on issues related to urban design, neighborhood development, community outreach, sustainability, and disaster and recovery planning. Mr. Manning holds a Bachelor of Architecture from Southern University, a Master of Architecture from the University of Michigan Tabam College of Architecture and Planning, with continuing education in design and management at Harvard University and Dartmouth College. Let's welcome our guest today, Ray Manning. Got some serious tongue twisters on here. Bring back New Orleans plan, this plan, that plan. Let's discuss kind of what you do, because you know a lot of people think of architects as design professionals. And we had Ken Schwartz, Dean of School of Architecture from Tulane earlier. Okay. And he kind of talked about the work that Tulane is doing and kind of how he's using that department to buttress Tulane's vision, the School of Architecture's vision, for what they want to do with their students, their faculty, and the assets of New Orleans. But you being a professional, day-to-day practicing architect, one could look at this and see a lot of planning, a lot of strategy, but I would love for you to share and start with the students a discussion about just the day-to-day architectural work that you may do as a design professional. Yeah.
Well, first, Irvin, thank you for inviting me. It's really an opportunity to come and visit and talk about. When you read that resume, it's otherworldly for me in a lot of ways. But to your point, the day-to-day business of being an architect is much like any other professional service firm. We offer a variety of services to our clients, architecture to educational institutions like UNO, Southern University, Tulane, Loyola, and in the area of transportation planning to firms or institutions like the Regional Transit Authority and the RPC, the Regional Planning Commission. And also we do a lot of work in the civic, cultural, and community, and also hospitality. When we seek work, we obviously try to work in the areas where we feel like we have our strongest or we have our core strengths. And with that, we go out and we market every day. We are constantly seeking work. And we have a firm now of about 32 people, I believe, with offices here in Dallas and in Las Vegas. And part of our corporate strategy is to be diversified in our billings, both geographically and in terms of client types. And it's one of the reasons I think we've been able to stay in business for 25 years. And so what I do is I'm the CEO of a firm, and I have a senior management team who help me run the organization. And so I don't spend a lot of time focused on every single project, but we try to bring in a variety of work. That work has scale, just small projects to very large projects, in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars. And so that really does help to define, the core strength of the firm, I think. And also, I think it also gives the people who come to work for us an opportunity to be involved in a variety of project types.
Can you imagine the field of architecture being kind of invisible, although you're an architect? So when you drive down the street, you go somewhere, I know. It's like, well, when I hear music, I could be in a grocery store and I know what's playing. Or I know what, I'm starting to think about what key it's in. Or when other people may just be driving past, or I'm thinking about the sounds, I can hear the air conditioning on right now and think about what frequency it's, it's humming at.
Yeah.
But could you imagine, I can still recognize that music is widely invisible to a lot of people. And what I've found from serving on the advisory board of architecture at Tulane is that to a lot of folks, there might be a disconnect unless you have a reason. You work at a school and you're trying to build something, or you want to build your own house, or you're in a neighborhood that you're trying to. But let's just say, you work as a, you work as a disc jockey. You may not necessarily be, architecture may be something that's invisible to you. So is that something you recognize? Is it something you don't? Are you out of touch with that?
Well, I think, I had a professor at Michigan who wrote a very long paper, I think, which is going to be a part of a forthcoming book of his, in which he said most of us take our physical environment for granted. We walk in a building, there's a certain psychological impact of doing that. We expect for there to be a door. We expect for there to be lights. We expect for there to be a chair. And so we assume that's all part of, the condition that if we come to a school, that's what we should find. But I think to the heart of your question is I drove out here today, it was really difficult for me to drive. It's always difficult for me to drive down Elysian Fields, because I lived here a lot of years before the storm, and I see the absolute absence of a kind of a spirit that existed. And the lot is vacant, the lot is overgrown, the street is crumbling. And so all of that and I guess I'm hypersensitive to that, and so I'm very much aware of my environment. I don't take that for granted at all. And I think that's what we try to do in our professional lives as well, is we try to make people more sensitive and educate people about what it means to have good architecture and great buildings. And that's what the firm is about. That's what my career, the last 30 years of my life have been about as well.
One more 100,000-foot aerial view question, and then I get to some specifics about your firm and what you're doing. And I think it'll add a lot of value for the students to kind of hear the stuff that you're really hands-on with. How complex, you're an architect, and you run a business.
Right.
So when you sit down with a lot of business folks, you have something in common. You have this firm.
Right.
You're paying insurance and salaries and all the issues, and human resource issues, and you're laying people off, you're hiring people. You're doing it. So there's something similar about that. But would you find a difference? And I'm kind of passionate about this because I feel like the architects are more like jazz musicians than, say, chefs. People kind of get now that maybe if you want to throw a good dinner party, the food's probably going to taste better if you got a chef.
Right.
Or maybe you have 1 or 2 dishes you can make, but you're probably not going to make 25 of them.
Right.
As good as a chef is. The difference is with an architect, I wonder, is when you work with these folks, right? Somebody calls you, Shell Oil Company, or Tulane University, or I don't know, could be whatever politician, the people who want to design something, the bus people. And they call you and they say, we want to design this street and this thing this way, and this is how we want to do it, and here's our vision. Right. Is it complex for you to say, okay, well, let me start from the beginning and tell you why, how, when, where, this is what architecture is?
Yeah.
Because it may be a person. One of the things I found serving on the library board, I didn't know anything about architecture at all, and I was, chairman of the board making a decision on, okay, maybe we'll put it, right here,
right,
just
right.
being a layman. So is that something is that easy? Is that complex? Do people come to you already with a certain knowledge about your experience?
Well, it depends. The thing about our practice is that we have a set of clients that are at every level. We have people who call us and they have no idea of what they're doing, and that's why they've called us.
For example?
For example, I got a call from a minister who wants to add on to a community facility in Pontchartrain Park.
Okay.
And he admits to me that he doesn't know, he knows that he needs a gym, he knows that he needs a stage. And he has an existing building, but he wants to add on to that. He doesn't know how much that should cost, where it should be located on the site. So I go out and I meet with him, and we walk the site and we talk about it, and then we sit down after I've done some research and talk about the very specifics of that particular building type. Then I have a client like Loyola University, who has a very specific program. They're very mature facility planners, and they will give you a detailed document as to what it is that they want. And so they expect you to be able to execute at their velocity, and they expect for you to be able to, interpret that program in a professional way. And so, again, very different clients with different types of understandings. But more to a point of our vision statement is we want to help illuminate our client's vision. We're not there to sort of presuppose a solution on anybody's project. What we want to do is we want to understand what is it that you want, what is your vision, what is it as a client are you trying to achieve with this particular building project. And so that is in a way of differentiating ourselves, because there are some architects that you hire because you want their style. And then you hire other architects because they have a large capacity or they're a national firm. And so as we try to compete with those folk, we have to find ways in which we can differentiate ourselves. And we found that when we are able to listen to our clients and understand what they want, then we have a very decided advantage, because a lot of people walk in the room as an architect, throw their cape and their hat on the table and start to pontificate. And we try not to be that kind of an architect. We're very much about listening and clarifying and confirming what we hear.
What type of person should become an architect, and what type of person should not become an architect?
Oh, God. So,
I mean, I always say, I might have been an architect if I would have known about the field when I was in high school, but I really didn't know about it. I came to it very late in life.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of key elements for me, and if I had to just boil it down to some very basic core strengths and areas, I think having artistic skills, being able to, having some deft skills with pencil, and a brush, whatever that might mean to you.
So you mean in an actual physical, artistic?
Right, to be able to draw. I mean, I think that's how I came to the point where I just made a decision that was something that I might want to pursue. I had another decided advantage because I grew up with a father who did construction. And so I was able to feel the pain, if you will, of what a construction worker does, And so that was very informative and was probably another reason I decided to become an architect as well. And then the third element, I think, which is really important, I think, is analytical thinking. And some people will say math. They will immediately say, well, I wasn't very good at math, so I decided not to be an architect. And I think that that's a part of it, but it's not. I think analytical thinking is really, because every building or every situation that you see in this room is a decision. Someone selected the carpet, someone selected the chairs. A decision had to be made. And so if you can frame at least I guess quantitative thinking or qualitative thinking is a real key component. And I think those three things, having some ability to draw, some ability to construct, making models, Legos, all of those things, and then the math and quantitative thinking skills. And then if you have those three things and you find yourself in the right environment, in terms of an educational institution that will nurture a student who may not have all of those strengths at the same level, then I think you have a good chance at becoming an architect. But I think you have to be extremely dedicated, 5 years of undergraduate school, 3 years as an apprentice, take a very difficult set of exams to become a licensed architect, and which the pass-fail rate is probably somewhere around 40, 60. It's a very difficult process. It's most people don't realize it's analogous in terms of time with becoming a physician.
Would you say, why do people do it?
Passion. People in this profession are extremely passionate about what they do.
When do you become it's an interesting process for you to talk, because medical school, you know about it, you hear about it your entire life. You turn on TV, right?
Right.
Aren't there like a whole bunch of like doctor shows now? Like, what's one of them?
Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, Grey's Anatomy. You watch it, wow, being a doctor's cool. But maybe it's you go to school, you do whatever, but it's not like you necessarily have that much about architecture. So
well, there was, I think the father in the Brady Bunch was an architect.
Oh, okay.
Is that true? Is that, yes. Did I make that up? And he went in his room and he had a desk, and and it was sort of idyllic in a way. He was at home, and but see that in a way misinforms people about what an architect does. And then there was Spike Lee did a movie called Jungle Fever, and the character in that movie, Wesley Snipes, was an architect, and there have been a number of other movies, but all of them center around the notion that an architect, or the fountainhead, which is probably the book that defines the American psychic around our architecture. And so, and then Gary Cooper's portrayal of that, you start to think that, guy has to, really want to run into a brick wall to get what he wants done, and so passionate that he's willing to sabotage his own career in order to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. And so I think being passionate to the degree that you're committed to the profession, but not passionate to the point where you become self-destructive, and two very different things for me. Because I feel like I'm as passionate about architecture as anyone, but I'm also a very practical business person as well.
Which brings me to my next question. I mean, you think about the Ayn Rand Fountainhead, which, if you haven't read that book, it'd be on the should-read list, definitely. But she portrays this character, and he is, this artist. I mean, true, you would not even imagine this to be an architect, really, because he's more like a visual artist kind of sort. He's got a vision. It's bigger than life. It's more important than anything else. And so much to the point where he blows up his own building rather than have his plans be changed. But so you talk about that artistic sense, and you at least says it accounts for 1/3 or at least 25% of what it takes to be in this profession.
Right.
Yet you show up to work.
Right.
And design is a part of a thing you do. You want to make sure things look beautiful and that they last and they're sustainable. And at the same time, there's this other side. There's the business side.
Right. There's
the politics side. There's the growth side. There's the partners. There's the, whatever human resources aspect of it. What's the balance? And my other question, besides balance, is can you make a decent living? I had a good question from somebody the other week. Said, can you make a living being an architect? Is that something that, like one would say being a jazz musician, you wouldn't say it's a profession you're going to go into, so, your 401k is just going to be the thickest in the world.
Right.
So, is it a...
Well, that's the dilemma. I mean, I have this conversation a lot with my staff and my senior management team, but to talk about it in terms of the structure of my organization in particular, because I've worked hard on that for a lot of years.
Okay.
I had a partner for 18 years. We were, in the beginning, I think, sort of naive about the way in which we both approached the business of architecture. And it took me a very long time to realize that we weren't. And so I called a decision in that partnership and said, I think we should end this. And I bought him out. I then went on to establish a way of working with a group of senior people within the firm that helped me to balance some of the things that you're talking about. We have 3 key objectives in our company. We have culture and design is one, and we have continuous improvement as a second, and then technology as a third. Those form the basis of which we manage the organization, but also it helps us always to be looking forward as opposed to looking back, and it covers most of those areas that you talked about: personnel issues, finance, and we hired a MBA controller, a person who came with a set of skills that we would not expect an architect to have. And so that group of 4 people and myself managed the firm. And so, again, if anyone tells you that, well, I'm Ray Manning and I own Manning Architects and I'm the greatest architect in the world, well, be wary of that, because no firm, and I know some of the biggest architects in America, none of them are singularly run and designed and managed. There's a corporate structure that exists that underpins their ability to go out and be a Frank Gehry or a Tom Main or and others. But the point is that if each of them had to do everything that it takes to be an architect, there wouldn't be enough hours in the day to do that. And so what the organization that we put together is that we look at our unique abilities and we try to make a team that's a unique ability team. And that each one of us comes with a set of strengths and goals and objectives, and we try to make that work. And so that's what I do as a CEO. I try to make that team function, and so I can be away for a week, as I have been. I was in Santa Monica last Wednesday, and I was a little under the weather getting back, and so I haven't been to my office in a week now. And but I get emails that say checks are coming in and payrolls are being made, and so I don't worry about that as much as I did at one point in my life. So that's probably a long way, but I think that was a second part of what you were asking, and can you make a living? The can you make a living part depends upon, and let me say this, right now in America, we are in a global recession. The architectural field has been impacted as much and more than other professions. If the unemployment rate is 9.6 or 10%, in architecture it's 25%. I went to, last May, I went out to visit Frank Gehry, internationally acclaimed architect, and he sat down with me for an hour or so and we talked about his business, and at that moment he had reduced his firm from 250 to 125. Greg Lynn, a very accomplished protege of his, had a small firm, 10, 12 people. He's down to 1 person. I left Santa Monica, flew to San Francisco on that same trip, met with a guy who has a firm there. They had been 150 people. They were down to 65. We are battered by recessions and changes in the dynamic of an economy. But during that same period, I was hiring people. And I think the only reason for that was because of the diversity of client types that I talked about. And I'm very proud of that fact and the fact that we've been able to sustain ourselves. Now, we also have had the silver lining of Katrina, where the economy has been, we've had a stimulus package for New Orleans in a way with some of the recovery dollars that have come in here. But again, most of those, that upside for my firm didn't come from this market. It came from Dallas and it came from Las Vegas. And that was a real big reason for some of the growth that we've been able to experience.
We've known each other for a while, and I've had the great pleasure of hearing your vision for not just New Orleans and not just the projects you're working on, but also for people. And so what I would like for you to share with the students today is, what is your vision for our students architecturally? What's your vision for New Orleans? What's your vision for what you would like to see them do you know, not just folks who are going to go in their profession and become great architects, but just folks that are going to, you know, leave with a liberal arts background and do many different things.
Yeah.
What is it, now that you have a dedicated, focused audience, what is it you would like to, you know, imprint upon them?
Well, I think the folk in this room represent the biggest opportunity for New Orleans. You know, it's been said, and there are lots of statistics about this, and that is that generation of the 25 to 35-year-olds are going to be the generation that really will help the city recover from, you know, where it was in 2005, and then empty nesters, people who will come to New Orleans who have educated their children, who are looking for an experience, a place that is really authentic, and New Orleans is that. It's a very livable, very walkable, authentic place to live. And so I think the opportunities here to grow a business, if you're entrepreneurial, you can grow a business here. And I also think that there are tremendous opportunities for the educated workforce. And so if you have a skill set, you have an opportunity to actually have a huge impact on a place. I was with Ron Foreman yesterday, who is head of the Audubon Institute, runs the aquarium and the zoo and the Species Survival Center. And we were talking, and one of the things that he said to me is that we have to recruit these students to stay in New Orleans because you represent the best opportunity. You know the place. You're not coming from Princeton or, you know, Los Angeles and coming here and saying, okay, I'm coming to make it better. You made a decision to be in New Orleans for 4 years at least, and you have an opportunity, I think, to have an impact on this place. Most of these students, I don't know, can you tell me how many of you are from places other than New Orleans? Okay. So most of the folk are here from New Orleans, and if we can get them to stay, and, you know, because we experienced over the last 25 years a tremendous brain drain in this city, and it was one of the reasons why, you know, we had such an imbalance in terms of our population makeup. And there's, you know, after all the studying and all of the things, you know, if we had had an appropriate balance in our population mix, you know, we wouldn't have had so much poverty here, and we would have been trying to pull people out of poverty and make them more active citizens in the community. My vision for New Orleans, I was just in Portland, and I'd never been to Portland, and I think I avoided going because I'd always heard, you know, Portland is on every, if you pull a list of best places to live, you know, Portland is number one. I mean, and I said, I don't want to go to Portland, you know, because it can't be that real, you know.
It's Oregon.
It's Oregon, yeah. And so I went, and I was there for a transit conference, and they really did a good job of showing how they had accomplished what they did. And it boiled down to, and oh, by the way, there is no sales tax in Oregon. So they have found a way to fund all these tremendous transit system, walkable community, you know, without a sales tax. And if you come to New Orleans and you say that, you know, people, you know, that 9% or whatever it is the backbone of our economy, and there's never enough money because it's always tied to spending. So I went to Portland, and I came back, and I thought, you know, I'm not going to try to I don't want to make New Orleans Portland. That's not the point of the thing. But what were the couple of elements that we could take from them that would make us, and I think we were on our way to doing some of those things with our streetcar expansion program, and also some of the new housing and redevelopment projects that have been done. And so I think if we give ourselves some time, if we can have 5 years more of uninterrupted, without a major storm event, I think we'll accomplish a lot of things that will make New Orleans put New Orleans in that best of class of cities in terms of livability.
Can you give us the top 3 things that you think they should be looking out for, of projects that you're, overseeing, looking at, watching? What should they kind of be saying, okay, this is coming?
Well, the most interesting and most important, I think, is the Iberville housing redevelopment.
Now, why would that be the most interesting?
Because I think it's going to test our community in ways that we haven't been tested. Iberville was the last of the public housing developments. It was not bulldozed when they did the Big Four. And so now we have this opportunity to try to do what HUD has asked, which is to develop 1 unit for every affordable unit there. So that means there are 800 affordable units there now, or public assisted units. We have to develop 800 of those, but we have to transform it into a mixed income neighborhood. And we have to do something to help reunite that community with Canal Street. And so I think it's one of those projects that is going to be in the national spotlight. Because Secretary Donovan at HUD has been there a number of times and looked at it.
Can I get a show of hands? How many people are familiar with the area that he's talking about? Well, what's so challenging about the area? I've been watching this area since I've been a kid, as I'm quite certain you have.
Yeah.
You're up against Canal Street. Many people have blamed this area in the last 25 years for the decline of Canal, and furthering the decline of the French Quarter and the, blight of Rampart. I mean, this is what people. I'm just. Yeah. It's not the first time you heard it from me, right?
No.
Right. So, then you have the argument of public housing.
Right.
Folks who need government assistance. You have the argument, folks saying that, look, when we already didn't build enough to replace what we had before. Now we're going to have less. But well, I don't want you to get too political, but what's your thoughts on
my political viewpoint and my design viewpoint and my entrepreneurial viewpoint are, in some ways, I think consistent on this. Because, one, I don't believe that Iberville has been the reason that Canal Street has declined. I think that has to do with a larger makeup of the way in which we have positioned retail in America. If you don't provide, and if you've ever been to a city where you can have free parking downtown, they have great downtown retail. What people want, essentially, is to drive their car to a place, park it, get out, and go in and shop. When you don't provide them with that, you're probably not going to have vibrant retail. It's as simple as that. So Iberville had nothing to do with that. I mean, that's just, when you have to pay $16 to park your car, I mean, I go to the Ritz from time to time and places, and you come out, it's $10, $12, $16 to park your car. The average American family, on a very strict income, can't afford that. And so they're not going to go there. And so what's left is just places that sort of are based on tourists and, athletic shoes, because, kid can take the bus and go down to Canal and buy his latest Air Jordans or whatever. And so you haven't had an opportunity for the kind of shopping or kind of shopping situation that most Americans want to have. And so we're no different in New Orleans. I mean, we like to think that we could have Gottschalk's and Gus Meyer's and all those places back, but those days have come and gone. And America shops at Walmart today, but they also shop at Saks, and Saks is still on Canal Street, and it's done very well because that's been the differentiator in the economy. The very low-end retailers have done very well, and the high-end retailers have done well, and the middle has been wiped out. And so that has nothing to do with Iberville. And my sentiment about public housing is that obviously we need to assist people who, by no fault of their own, are not able to, be able to find a place to live. We don't want to increase the homeless population. But most people won't know this. There are 855 units at Iberville, 462 are occupied. I would suggest that 25 to 30% of the people who are there are elderly. And so when you look at those statistics, you start to say, well, look, I could solve this problem tomorrow. Okay, give me 300 jobs. I just need 300 jobs. I need to build an assisted living community for the elderly. And I could take care of everybody that's there. Where do I find those jobs is the question. Because again, the scourge on our community, or at least in the African American community, has been drugs and alcohol. Boise Bollinger, who owns Bollinger Shipyards, tells me he'd hire more people today, and the biggest prohibitor of him doing that is the fact that most people can't pass a drug test. So guy goes, he applies for a job, they say you got to be drug tested to come and work, and he can't pass the drug test. So, there's a whole cycle of things that have absolutely nothing to do with architecture, but all have to do with the impression that somehow this physical place is causing this problem. And nobody will ever sit quietly and calmly and talk about what are the real problems that are affecting that community. And when you look at the makeup of that community, again, is single women with children. So all of those issues start to frame, how you have to look at the community, and that's again about listening as opposed to walking in with a preconceived notion of what it is that we're going to design.
I don't know if you've ever been familiar with something that I do at the end of all of the core sessions we do here. I do a kind of a word association and a prose questionnaire. So I give you a word, and you say the first thing that comes to your mind. I asked you a question, you say the first thing that comes to you. Now,
do you really want me to give you the first thing that comes to my mind?
Do y'all want him to give you the first thing that comes to his mind? Yeah, totally.
Okay.
You ready?
Right. Can we? Yeah, you have the list already. Okay. Okay. Well, may I have a sip of water first?
Yeah, sure. Just let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. Elysian Fields.
Boulevard.
Claiborne Avenue.
I-10.
9th Ward.
Flood.
Treme.
Beauty.
Uptown New Orleans.
White.
St. Charles Avenue.
White.
Broadmoor.
White.
Public Library.
Dismal.
Tulane University.
Outstanding.
University of New Orleans.
Outstanding.
Governor Bobby Jindal.
Terrible governor.
Former Mayor Ray Nagin.
I lost him somewhere.
Current Mayor Mitch Landrieu.
Hopeful.
Current City Council.
Not as hopeful.
What is your favorite word?
Integrity.
What is your least favorite word?
Liar.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Truth.
What turns you off?
Liars.
What is your favorite curse word?
Motherfucker.
What sound or noise do you love?
Crisp sheets on a Saturday morning.
What sound or noise do you hate?
The toilet running over.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
The law.
That's a first in this session. What profession would you like not to do?
I would like not to be the President of the United States.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Good job.
All right, let's open it up for some questions for Ray Manning. Yes, ma'am.
Do you feel that with the Iberville and with all of the new developments, not so much just public housing, but like up and down Tulane and on Poydras, they have built so many grant-assisted properties that now the market is saturated beyond need? Do you feel that it's going to be a detriment to the future housing market of New Orleans because now you have independent property owners who can't rent their properties because some guy built a 600-unit building with government assistance money, and now he has to rent it at half the price somebody can rent there double for?
It's a real problem. I think BGR did a study, and they said when you look at our metropolitan area, we carry more of the public housing units in Orleans Parish, and there's a reason for that. People, think of New Orleans as a poor place, and therefore, they need public assistance or housing. I think at some point we're going to pay a price for that, and you'll see a shakeout of that in about 5 years, because that's when some of those grants will have rotated into another cycle where they could either, I think the way some of them work is that they can become condos after 5 years, and so you'll see them change in some way. But I think we probably have as much public assisted housing as we need today. I don't think we need a lot more. I think what we need is an economy. I think we need jobs. I think we need to put people to work. And I think, I think every statistic, every poll says that, throughout the country, people want to go to work. I mean, people have a sense of self when they are contributing in some way. And I think we need to find ways to put people to work.
Next question. Yes, ma'am.
What is the New Orleans Master Plan?
The New Orleans Master Plan is a document which involved the 13 planning districts in the city. It is the city's official roadmap for development and outlines a vision for the city in terms of livability, prosperity, and sustainability. It's on the web at, I think it's nolamasterplan.org or something very similar to that, if not that. It's a very involved discussion. We spent from 2008 to 2009, and in 2008, the citizens of the community gave it the force of law, which was kind of a repetitive action because the charter actually did that already. And so now we have a document that is going to be we're now developing our zoning ordinance that supports the changes that we proposed in the land use plan for the city. What it really tries to do is eliminate the conditional use process where you had to go to your city councilman and seriously get kiss the ring, as they used to say, to get a change made. So now it should simply, if you follow the zoning, you should be able to do that without a lot of political intervention.
Next question. Yes, ma'am.
I've read a little bit about, over a couple of years, a thing called the Greenway for bikes or something. It goes from like the French Quarter down to City Park. And I was wondering if you were involved or if the Manning architecture was.
Well, we're not involved in that, but it is part of our thinking as we do Iberville. The Lafitte Greenway is what you're referring to, and it will essentially connect the lakefront to the French Quarter. As you make that bend in front of Armstrong Park, there was a Winn-Dixie there, and from that point all the way out to Bayou St. John, there will be an active bicycle path and walkway, and so I think it'll be. If you've been in New York recently and saw the Skyline or High Line, which is a high, elevated walkway in the meatpacking district, it will be our High Line for New Orleans. I think it'll bring a lot of attention to the fact of the pedestrian nature of New Orleans. I'm really excited about that project. I'm not involved professionally, but I'm a big fan of the folk who are working on that, and I think it'll be good. good for the city.
Next question. Yes, sir.
What were the other top 2 projects that we should look out for? 'Cause
Oh, I didn't get to the other
got
two.
tracked off then. I was
Okay.
curious.
I would say I'm very excited about some work that I've been doing with colleague Alan Eskew. I think he's been to your class. We've been working on a proposal for the celebration of the 300th year anniversary of the founding of the city of New Orleans in 2018. And New Orleans 2018 is a collection of projects which are going to, in essence, fill in that second phase of the Reinventing the Crescent project and sort of the heart of the city. And the third one, the third project is one I really can't talk that much about, but I'll frame it for you. It's at the other end of that spectrum. It's a retail project. It's gonna. There was some discussions about it in the paper the other day, and you probably can figure that out. But I'm very excited about some meetings that we've had over the last couple of days with a major retailer who could bring at least, as he puts it, about 2.5 million new visitors to New Orleans who aren't coming. And we have a real opportunity to make that happen. And the essence of that is before the storm, we were at about 10 million visitors a year, and we're now at about 7. And so we really, to get back to 2005, we need to find ways to attract at least 3 million visitors to the city. And in this one project, we might be able to accomplish about half of that number. And so I'm really excited about it. And you'll hear about it. It'll be big news whenever it hits the paper. So.
Is there any other clue you could give to that? Like, I mean, like, I don't know what industry.
I could give you the site. There's a set of towers at the other end of the convention center, Market Street Power Plant. Yes.
I heard about that in the paper the other day, how not about what they were going to do with it, but that they wanted to do something with it.
Yeah.
Maybe like 2 days ago.
There was a developer out of Miami who had originally purchased from Entergy for $10 or $12 million, bought the building, and they went into bankruptcy. And it's going to be emerging from bankruptcy very soon, and there's a development plan that's being discussed about that. And so I think it's one of those things that'll be a landmark project. But there are other projects that we're working on now. We do a lot of work at Xavier University. We're planning a new 5,000-seat convocation center for them, which will be a LEED building. And it'll be their first LEED building, which is Leadership in Environmental and Energy Design, Sustainable Green Project. And so when that's done, that's going to give them the opportunity to attract more activities to that part of town, Girt Town. And I think that'll be good for the community as well.
Any other questions for Raymond? Yes, ma'am.
On paid parking in the French Quarter and even the warehouse district, is there any way that could go away? There wouldn't be any paid parking, and
Well,
is that even possible?
I was in Charleston many times over the last 5 years, at family there, and they just simply bit the bullet. They said their downtown wasn't going to survive if the city of Charleston didn't build some free parking. So they did a bond issue and they constructed it, and you know, they have 3 municipal lots, and then they have a major enclosed structure, and those that did everything for them. They've got a downtown that attracts a lot of people. People simply don't want to pay for parking when they have the option to drive to Metairie and park for free. And you can see what happened at Lakeside over the last 2 years, 3 years. They built more parking. And the sound of that 4 or 5% sales tax going to Jefferson Parish is that sucking sound when you hear Mitch Landrieu talk about the $70 million deficit that we have. How many of you shop at the Apple store in Metairie? Or have?
Shame on you.
Okay. You know, this developer who we've been talking to at the power plant, I said to him, I'll work on your project, but you got to do one thing for me. You got to build me an Apple store. And we laughed about it. It's kind of a joke. But the point is that 30 to 40% of their sales come from Orleans Parish. And we're deriving absolutely no benefit as a community for, I think, someone, as we were talking earlier, the number of students in Orleans Parish, and college students, who are staggering. And so they all go to the Apple store in Jefferson Parish. There's no Best Buy in Orleans Parish. I mean, you think about that, it would seem to me that someone would say, well, let's go fly to the corporate headquarters of Best Buy and make sure that we have one here. And so as an architect, but more as a citizen, when I talk to developers like these folk from Miami, I say, here are the things that I want to see. When you go to the movies, where do you go? Besides Canal Place, which just opened, great facility, where do you go?
Elmwood,
Elmwood, you go to Jefferson Parish. I rest my case. I think we need to do something that just keeps our retail dollars here, and I think we'll be okay in the short term. And then maybe Jefferson will start having some problems. But I don't live in Jefferson. I've never lived there. So.
Yes, ma'am.
With the project of the smokestacks, as much as you can say, because that's my neighborhood. Like, I live blocks from there, so I'm just wondering, like, can you tell a little bit how that's going to affect the residential neighborhood? How that's going to affect, like, my street and parking?
Tell me what street you live on.
Thalia.
I think one of the suggestions that we made before we do any design work, we're going to be doing we hope to do a large-scale traffic study, because right now there's some real traffic problems down there, with the port and with the convention center and the way vehicles come through there.
Yep.
And what you want to attempt to do is to try to solve as many problems if you do a large project as you can. I think there'll be a lot of structured parking, so there won't be a lot of parking on the street if that's a concern. And again, it'll be based on a number of models that exist around the country, where the first 3 to 4 stories of any of the development will be parking, and then above that might be retail or residential, and that's sort of the vision. But again, there'll be public meetings, and we'll do a lot of outreach, trying to make sure that we don't create any controversy. New Orleans is very fond of that, but as it seems to me that the case I would make is what I've already said, which is we need retail opportunities to be in New Orleans. If we're going to be a consumer economy, then we need to have those opportunities in Orleans Parish. If not, we can't be successful as a community.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think we missed the boat with the master plan after Katrina? I mean, there's so many areas that still have, 20% recovery? I mean, let's say, for instance, you talk about Xavier, like from Washington to Earhart, that whole, and maybe from like Jeff Davis over to Carrollton, 75% of that is still fallen down, gutted, or maybe not even gutted houses. I feel like, and I don't know, I'd like your professional opinion on it, I think that somewhere along the line, somebody should have had the foresight to say, let's give this entire area to Xavier and let them develop it with green spaces and opportunities, because there's just so many dilapidated places that seem like they're never going to get fixed. And it's not just that neighborhood, they're everywhere.
Let's go up to the 30,000-foot level.
Yeah.
5 years ago, the city's just been 80% flooded.
And I'm coming back.
Right.
5 years later and I'm still not back.
Right. And at that moment, it would have been hard, I think, for anyone to make decisions appropriate to the future without looking at the trauma that the city had gone through. And I think we paid scant attention to that. And so we attempted to make people feel that it was possible to get back immediately to where we were, which was not an appropriate, I think, public policy decision. But again, this is America. There's the whole right of private property, and so we said let's build everywhere and for everyone. I think today, 5 years later, you could have a larger, more informed, citizen-driven conversation about that. I've been working with David Wagner. If you haven't invited him to come, please do. He has an interesting story to tell around water management strategies that he has been developing with the Dutch embassy and the Dutch government. And David's work and my participation in that has always suggested that there might be areas of the city that perhaps you could not ever make sustainable. But you can't make that decision without doing the science and the geology and all of the testing that would simply make the clear case to the citizen. And finally, could you fund that? And what I mean by funding that is, could you go into a community like the Ninth Ward and make the financial commitment to say, perhaps we would not have habitation here? And what would that cost? I think you could have done that 5 years ago, but it would have always, in New Orleans, would have always been labeled racism and the whole underclass being taken advantage of. And but again, I think we perhaps have a better chance of having that conversation today.
I think the other thing we have to recognize is we're talking about real estate. We're talking about people's property. So when you talk about people's property, for most people, you're talking about their single source of net worth. And so anytime you make a major decision, for instance, to say Xavier University is going to gain that entire net worth, I mean, you're taking a tremendous amount of potential wealth or opportunity for a group of people and transferring it. And one thing I'd have to say about, which is one of the things why I created this course, was so we can have a sustained discourse on this kind of a thing. There's also what the public wants. And so the job of elected officials and people, it doesn't make a difference how logical it is. What makes a difference is what the public wants. And if the public wants something that may be illogical to some plan, it is the job of the elected official to do what the public desires. So that being said, the will of the Ninth Ward was not to transfer its property. And the will of the people by Xavier was not to transfer their property. And
most of those folks have like collected road home money and then done nothing with their property. So here we are 5 years later, and I mean, you leave your house and you go up Pine Street to get to the interstate.
Well, I think let's take it to the 100,000-foot discussion. Road home was a failed system. So once again, some people got some money. Yeah, and if they didn't spend it, more power to them. If they did spend it, a lot of people spent their money and did not have enough. The recovery of New Orleans, unfortunately, has really been with a good bit of personal, private citizen money. So these are things that we have to address. I'm just saying, you can't look at road home and say it was a perfect situation, then throw that at the problem, and then look at and say.
The road home, there was a great photograph, and I can't remember the exact source of it, but the decisions that were made about road home were to try to calculate, how big a dollar value to have to ask Congress for. So somebody came up with a number and said, can we sell that to Congress? I was still evacuated when I was reading articles in the Washington Post when we asked for $250 billion, I think it was, and the Washington Post wrote an editorial and called us a bunch of thieves and liars. So we never had the support that we needed from the federal government, who, in my opinion, had caused the problem. And so we then had to battle just the ability. And when you went back and looked at some of the film footage of people waiting in line for road home assistance, the elderly folk, I've got my own personal stories about that. You know, I know that that was a failed process and a failed program, and I agree with Irvin that, you know, most of what you have seen has been just a personal effort of citizen-driven efforts in this community. Maybe a little road home money, but heck, you know, that didn't break the bank. And let me say this, and this is, if someone had come to New Orleans as they did in Baghdad, no, and drove around with pallets of $100 bills on 18-wheelers, we lost $10 billion unaccounted for just having trucks driving through Baghdad with pallets of $100 bills. If someone had come here and said, logically, to someone in the 9th Ward, tell me what your property was worth before Katrina. Okay, can't determine that. Okay, we'll get an appraisal for it. And we'll give you a resettlement fee. And we will give you a fee or grant based upon your hardship and pain, suffering, whatever. And say, but we want to buy your property. If you went through a process like that, there would have been a lot of people who said, you know what, maybe I can go. But nobody ever talked to anybody in that way. It was all sort of this global.
Plus, to add to the Ken Feinberg. Is anybody familiar with who Ken Feinberg is? Ken Feinberg is the person who's now in charge of the banking.
The BP.
The BP oil spill.
The oil spill settlement.
He did oil spill settlement. Before that, I believe, before that he did 9/11.
9/11.
So the 9/11 fund, and this is from Ken Feinberg's mouth, from his mouth to my ear at breakfast in Washington, D.C. And he said, after 9/11, New Orleans does not have to worry about getting the type of blank checkbook people got for 9/11. He said, just the American public will. 9/11, the emotions ran high. People said, if we ran out of money when we were paying people for 9/11, we went and printed some more money. It's that simple. That was my job. I went back, I got some more money, I came back, here's some more money. When New Orleans issue came up, the issue was, okay, let's agree upon an end number and make it work. So our catastrophe wasn't met with, let's do whatever it takes to solve it. Our catastrophe was met with, we're not comfortable with giving you this level of resources beyond this point.
Because we don't think you can manage it. And it was very parental, and in a lot of ways we were still fighting the Civil War. You know, you had northern legislators who didn't want to see those kind of resources come into this community. You had, you know, that whole southern strategy on the part of the Republicans and the way they dealt with race and class. All of those issues impacted this community in ways where we never really had an opportunity to really have a conversation about what was it going to take to make the city sustainable. You know, there's an 1884 map of the city which shows the exact flood pattern that occurred. In 1884-87, the footprint of the city was area that was dry when the city was flooded in 2005. And I think, given our current population and the number of vacant and abandoned properties in the city, we probably don't have a land mass problem to solve our housing and habitation issues within the dry area. And at some point, trust me, in the national psyche, if there is another Katrina, someone is going to say, let's have a commission on whether or not New Orleans should exist or not. That will be the discussion.
But we didn't help ourselves too much with the way Road Home was managed. I mean, I think something like in the first 24 months, they spent $2 to $1 for maintaining the company who was administering it and how much they paid out. So
Yeah, but that was an East Coast, Virginia-based company, which had nothing to do.
Than the homeowners.
But again, that had nothing to do with the ability of people who are from New Orleans and people who live here.
The reason I think these discussions are important is because typically the people who are making those decisions are not experts. I think I think it's the most interesting thing about our class is we bring in an expert to talk about what the expert does. However, when you start to talk about things at a larger level, a city, there are a lot of people who are not experts. A lot of those people are us, meaning that it's volunteers. You know, you may find yourself volunteering at some point and making decisions, because that's what you do when you volunteer. You step into something and you're a volunteer and you make a decision based upon how you feel, what the people say in your neighborhood. You know, you went back home and some people said, man, can you please just put this thing here, you know, this post office or this library or this park or whatever. And you say, well, in our hearts, this is what we really want. The same thing happens at a national level when people say, you know, maybe this city should or should not exist, because there are people that turn on the TV. It's like what Soledad O'Brien said when she was our guest in class. People turn on the TV, they see the tsunami and say, wow, that's really hard. And those people make decisions based on those types of things. We all do it. You know, we look at what someone may go through in San Francisco. We look at what people may go through in Haiti. We look at it. And so I think it is important for us to do like Andre Perry talked about last session, cross-pollination. And really, you know, perhaps be polymaths, be people who are familiar with several things and have some level of understanding of how it connects, so we can go get the experts when needed, and we can know really when we should be upset, when we shouldn't be upset. And I just think that Katrina is not just about a Katrina discussion. I think it's an ongoing discussion, like about how valuable would you like your degree to be? You want it to be valuable? How valuable would you like your land to be? How valuable would you like your experience for healthcare to be? How valuable would you like the actual US dollar to be? How valuable would you like your quality of life to be? How valuable would you like things to be designed? Well, how valuable do you want your relationship to be with the people who are designing things? And I think, unfortunately, we don't have enough of that discussion, because it's very focused discussions, like you pick up the paper and somebody says, we're going to, you know, we bought this thing's coming out of bankruptcy. Right? And, you know, hopefully the right people in the right place at the right time, and they get the job and it gets done, or it goes to the wrong people and it goes back into bankruptcy. Or however it happens. So I guess the point I'm trying to make to all of you is really, as we look over the next 10 years, you know, it's you guys that have to kind of figure out how y'all going to make this thing work, because I'll be retired by that point. And I'll be...
Well, the comment I would make to that, the retirement issue, is this, that the city has an opportunity to become, I think, because of its location and what we've had to experience, I think, to become a world center for disaster and recovery planning, preparation, and recovery. And you have the opportunity to be those world leaders. There's no other place where this has happened. There's no other place in the world where a city of an American city was evacuated and repopulated, rebuilt, and the story's still out as to whether or not we're going to be successful or not, but we have the opportunity to do that. And I think, and again, when we do Katrina 10, you know, I think we'll be looking back at a very different place than where we are today even. And I think we've made a lot of progress. And I think Ray Nagin, you know, I think when you write the history on Ray, you know, you'll be able to see that, you know, the period of time and the balancing act that he had to do and all the things that he was faced with, you know, he will not be as demonized as perhaps he has been most recently, because there's nobody can tell me that you could have walked in his shoes. I think my disappointment there was I just wish he had reached out more, you know, and that's just my personal disappointment. But I think we have an opportunity to be a world center for disaster recovery planning.
Well, let's thank our guest, Ray Manning. See you guys next week. Well, next week we don't have class. Monday we have my lecture. Oh, a week from Monday. Good. Okay, I'll see you guys a week from Monday.